Watch this.
These programs and services have erupted on campuses to create a sense of belonging because many people don't always feel welcome.
The State Board of Education continues to make its case to limit DEI programs on college campuses. And today, they opened up their resolution discussion to lawmakers. Another small victory for those defending Idaho's abortion laws. This time, the trafficking law is back on the enforceable list. You may not have known, Caldwell has a train depot interpretive center. Okay, so then you probably didn't know it's closing, but it's not saying goodbye forever. As we pointed out 11 days ago, nowhere in Idaho code is diversity, equity, and inclusion defined. What those terms grouped together might mean and what they include and what they do not. Individually, sure, they mean something, but combined in a 2 or 3 word combo, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, have become charged words. And because of that, Idaho State Board of Education has charged itself with drafting a resolution to limit DEI policies and programs on the campuses of Idaho's colleges. That resolution basically says Idaho's institutions of higher education will maintain equal opportunity regardless of identity. There'll be no DEI-related office policies or initiatives. Any success center will be open to all students, and no employee or student will have to declare gender or pronouns. That's what they all say there. So you might say the State Board has been seeing the writing on the wall for some time with the contentious legislative debates where lawmakers have threatened the last several years to pull millions of dollars from Idaho's public universities' budgets for anything with a hint of DEI language. So this is just the trustees trying to get ahead of it for this upcoming session, right? Well, some of these schools have already done the same thing. For example, 3 weeks ago, 1 week before that State Board of Education special meeting 2 weeks ago, Idaho State University made an announcement. President Robert Wagner put out a message saying the Pocatello School would be, quote, restructuring the Office of Equity and Inclusion after careful consideration and discussion with members of our institutional community. The Office of Equity and Inclusion would be renamed, he says, the Office of Equal Opportunity and Title IX. President Wagner added, with this restructuring, the Diversity Resource Center and the Gender Resource Center, they will dissolve and they're going to be reintegrated into broader student support services. Well, 4 days later, University of Idaho sent out an email to staff and students in the Moscow School saying they'd be closing all offices in their Equity and Diversity unit. That would include the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which covers the Black and African American Cultural Center, the Women's Center, and the LGBTQ plus office, among several others, including the Black Student Union. Well, then the day after we shared that in our story about 2 weeks ago, the day after the State Board of Education meeting, U of I backtracked on that, saying it did not want to act too quickly since the State Board of Education hasn't yet made a decision on their resolution. But today, they talked more about it, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. First, we're going to take a quick break and bring you this story from Aspen Shuppert right after this. All right, as you mentioned before the break, Idaho's colleges and universities are kind of circling the wagons when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trying to push it to the side, change the names, make it seem like it's not there on their school grounds. Well, the State Board of Education is kind of helping reinforce that circle of defense by coming up with a resolution, a draft resolution that they talked about for the first time a couple of weeks ago before the Thanksgiving break. But today they talked more about it, and this time with the state's DEI committee. Aspen Shumpert was there to listen in.
Idaho students are worried about the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion resources on public university campuses.
These are the resources we come to love and need to have, so it's imperative that we have a say in this. If you're going to take it away, then you won't take it away without our voice.
At Monday's DEI committee meeting, committee members heard a resolution draft from the State Board of Education.
The importance of going forward is making sure that those students know where to go and that singular area of focus knows that they can get the support for whatever they need there.
It's the same resolution the State Board of Ed introduced at a special meeting November 21st. The resolution, if passed, states there will be no DEI central offices or policies on campus for students or in relation to hiring and applications.
I would argue that if a student club, and we've had many discussions with other institutions about that, wants to start something, they should have the freedom and right to do that because that is freedom of assembly and that is student-led. What we're talking about here is from an institutional focus. Should the institutional focus be on one group or another, or should it be about all students?
One of the DEI committee members, Senator Melissa Wintrow, pushed back on the draft's intention.
Have there been complaints filed that programs are denying access to other folks? For example, Women's Center denying men access to the Women's Center at U of I.
The reality that support, whether Women's Centers excludes men or not, right, is a focus. Would a man go to a Women's Center? Yeah, but in average person terms, would you know to go get support at a Women's Center?
Senator Wintrow says she's seen it with her own eyes at Boise State.
In my time there, 2 men came to the center who had been raped by other men. And they weren't going to go somewhere else because they had been raped by other men.
While other Idaho public universities have already decided to cut DEI resources without the resolution passed, several Boise State students sat in the room Monday, hoping their campus isn't next to make cuts.
We are housed under these centers, and these are things that I come as a second home to me, as a place of community, in a state where I don't really see people like me a lot that aren't on the football team.
Charles says he is disappointed other universities decided to cut DEI resources, but he's not surprised.
It's been known that in times of uncertainty and fear, that sometimes they will jump shit and rip the Band-Aid off before it's done. So it's very sad that they didn't stick in the fight.
And he wants Boise State to stick in the fight.
If there's taken away, then it's going to be dropping of making a school more inclusive to people of the LGBT communities, Black, Brown communities, taking the resources they need to channel the hard ways of life, especially in a state like Idaho.
Students I've spoken to across multiple universities discussing these changes to DEI resources want Idaho lawmakers and members of the State Board of Education to know how these resources have positively impacted their college experience, but also those in power are missing a piece of the puzzle here, that DEI offices on these campuses are already open to all students. So that question still comes to many of these students of why do they have to close if they're open to all and we're trying to get to this kind of center for everyone.
And I think Senator Winstrow's question of have you had any complaints about these programs or policies and offices on campuses?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important one to ask and to get an answer to.
Yeah, and we heard Senator Wintrow ask that question, and the State Board of Ed didn't have something to give back, and they didn't have data to show that. I think it's probably something they're going to look into now that they've gotten feedback from the DEI committee, and certainly more questions were raised about this resolution.
And some of you might remember, it was several years ago when this first was brought up at the state legislature, when there was complaints of a Boise State student who was made to feel inferior because of for being white and to apologize for being white. has proven to not be true. So that allegation, I mean, you can hear and have these allegations, but none of that has been proven true yet. So they're just kind of have to look into that. As you said, it's going to take some investigative work to find out if there are any complaints about these programs. All right. Thank you very much, Aspen. Idaho's abortion trafficking law has been mostly unenforceable, that is until today. A panel of judges from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the late 2023 decision of a federal judge that blocked that enforcement of that law while a lawsuit plays out. Well, that lawsuit, Matsumoto versus Labrador, is challenging Idaho's law that prevents any adult taking a child across state lines to obtain an abortion without the permission of that child's parent. The crime of abortion trafficking passed in 2023, and it carries a 2 to 5 year prison term. Lourdes Matsumoto, an Idaho attorney, and 2 advocacy groups claim the law violates freedom of speech, the right to travel, and the right to freely associate. Well, back in November of last year, a federal judge granted a temporary restraining order while the lawsuit was being decided. Today, in an appeal to the Ninth Circuit, that court panel said the law can be enforced, claiming the law is not too vague and does not violate the First Amendment rights of the advocacy groups. Idaho's Attorney General and defendant in this case, that'd be Raul Labrador, sent out this statement this afternoon, calling it a tremendous victory for Idaho and defending the rule of law as written by the people's representatives. We will not stop protecting life in Idaho, he said. So, in Idaho's abortion trafficking law can be enforced while the lawsuit continues through the courts. Well, just how fast does a car have to be going to launch over a barrier, through a power pole, and onto the roof of a house? Nampa police are still trying to figure that out, and what happened in that fatal crash yesterday. Abby Davis has those details and what else you need to know in today's 411 on the 208.
I ran outside and saw a brick on the front yard, and my neighbor looking at my next door neighbor's house and looked up and saw the car.
Police say 1 person is dead and 2 others are injured after a car missed a turn on Amity Road. Launched off a barrier, hitting a chimney on one house and then crashing into the roof of another Nampa house yesterday. 31-year-old Jose Teran Chaparro from Nampa was riding in the front passenger seat and died in the crash. Again, the 2 other people in the car were injured. Both homeowners say this isn't the first time their homes have been hit. The speed limit on the street is 20 miles per hour, but the car was estimated to be traveling at 110 to 130 miles per hour. Governor Brad Little sent Idaho State Police troopers to the southern border for the 4th time. He said the 13-person team will help the Texas Department of Public Safety intercept drug and human traffickers. Little says the troopers will train other troopers on tactics used by Mexican drug cartels. The Mountain West Volleyball Tournament champion is in, and it isn't San Jose State or Boise State. Colorado State beat the Spartans in 4 sets to claim the title on Saturday and get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. San Jose State made it to the championship game after Boise State forfeited their semifinal match against the Spartans last Wednesday, ending Boise State's season. This was BSU's 3rd forfeit against San Jose State because of an alleged transgender athlete on San Jose State's team. We've tried to talk to BSU's volleyball team, but nobody's gotten back to us. The CDC says 1 in 3 U.S. adults feel lonely, especially in nursing homes, which is why the Idaho Commission on Aging is inviting the public to write a note, send a card, or have your kids draw a picture. Address the note to quote any resident and drop it off at a local facility. Starting today, you can adopt a dream bike for Boise Bicycle Project's 18th annual Holiday Kids Bike Giveaway. More than 600 kids were referred by nonprofits, social workers, and school counselors for the Dream Bike program, setting a new record. Kids draw their dream bike, then BBP staff make it happen by recycling old bikes and building them to match each kid's drawing. You can make a kid's dream come true by financially sponsoring a bike or donating your time. Just go to boisebikeproject.org to help. Kids get their bikes on December 14th. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Well, the train is leaving the station for the Caldwell Train Interpretive Center. And your last day to get on board, December 7th. But don't worry, it's going to be coming back bigger and better. Do you know what we are coming back with? Your comments. You can text them to us, 208-321-5614. They could be comments, they could be questions, they could be concerns. But they also have to have the hashtag, the 208. Oh, and your name. That way, we know who we're talking to at the end of the show. You know, on Caldwell's Main Street, you'll find a lot going on. There are bars, steakhouses, other restaurants, the Indian Creek Plaza. But tucked behind all of that is the Caldwell Train Depot. Built in 1906 by the Union Pacific Railroad Company for $40,000. The depot was once at the center of Caldwell's downtown activity. The train would take people up to college in Moscow, over to Utah, and even further away. But after buying it for just $1 in 1989 from the Union Pacific Company, City of Caldwell has owned it and restored it with their downtown revitalization effort. That started in the early 2000s. It's a mixed-use facility now with a museum and an event center space. But as Hunter Funk found out, the museum has reached the end of the track.
Like a train, life has a way of going by fast, heading in different directions. The same can be said for the city of Caldwell, finding itself at a new junction.
We find that there is a waning interest in things like museums, interpretive centers, and even in other cases, local fairs and carnivals. So we need to readjust how we use our facilities.
But in order to get to this junction, you need a conductor to get you there. In 2001, in walked Debbie Geyer.
All right.
Working for the Caldwell Planning and Zoning Department at the time, her boss signaled a question.
If there was one building that you could help with restoring, which one would it be? And I said, well, I think it has to be the train depot, because I found a picture in the archives that was a concept of this train depot with a plaza in the downtown.
Geyer says at the time the depot was a city gym and used for karate, but deteriorating. But thanks to donations, state and federal grants,
by 2004 we were able to open the doors to a newly restored building.
Both an event center and a museum.
This is Main Street depicted at the turn of the century.
It showcases the vast history of Caldwell when the train was operational.
There's just a lot of history. This over here is the inner urban line, which was essential before the train even started, even in regards to soldiers leaving from Caldwell to many wars, starting with like World War I, World War II, all of that was right here. Old phones, I mean, there's just a lot of memorabilia.
The train depot drove commerce into Caldwell.
And transportation was the element that really put Caldwell on the map.
But now the museum is hitting the brakes.
It's difficult when you're talking about using taxpayer dollars to keep something open that's only used 4 hours a month.
Through community input fueling the change, a bigger event space and places for meetings gained momentum. So the items will go and the museum will become that change.
We just talk about the highest and best use, and in an evolving and changing community, it's time that this place also evolve and change to meet the use of our community.
It's been a great effort for 20 years, so it's not totally shut the door and lock it, but it's just moving on to another purpose.
And they are having a final museum open house on Saturday, December 7th. And tonight, the task force Friends of the Depot, who helped keep this museum alive, will be dissolved at the city council meeting.
Okay, so the building's not going anywhere. That's going to stay there because you want to keep those around.
Right.
But what about the stuff inside?
So all the stuff inside today, also at the city council meeting, they are coming to the agreement that they will need to pass it on to someone. So they've talked to other depots to see if it can be displayed there, other city museums they have around, seeing if it can go there. So they're just going to disperse it. They know.
You'd like to think there would be something Caldwell specific that stuff could stay basically in its own
especially with its importance, you know, of it being there. But yeah, kind of sad.
I know. All right. Thanks, Hunter.
Yeah.
All right, here's some Feel Good Friday for your Monday, the day after a holiday. Holiday spirit is in full swing, of course, because it's KTVB's Toy Shopping Spree. That was held this morning, where Justin Core and I raced around Fred Meyer. We raced against Maggie O'Mara and Brenda Rodriguez, and the whole point was to see as many carts as we could fill with as many toys as possible. So who did that?
I also heard the boys did not practice this year. They are not ready. They're not even stretching.
3, 2, 1, go! 3, 2,
Said I'm shockingly winded.
You only got about 2 cards?
Just 2? 2 whole displays, but whatever, nobody's counting. Actually, they did. They did count. They counted all of it, and we lost by a landslide. No form of stretching could have prevented that today because we got our tails kicked. But it's all for the kids, so that's all that's important. All those toys that we collected today they're going to go to the children supported by the Salvation Army, making sure their holiday season is a little bit brighter this time of year. And our next shopping spree, there's one more. We're going to do it in Twin Falls. Not us, but a couple other members of KTVB. They're going to be in Twin Falls next Tuesday. That'd be December 10th. And here's some other good news we'd like to share because something else happened over the Thanksgiving break. Joe Paris and his wife Haley welcomed their son Finn to this world. Finn Samuel Paris. This happened last Tuesday. Joe says everyone is healthy, doing great. And he added thanks for those words of advice before he left. Said they're reminded daily about the generous and loving community we live in and lucky to have Finn, sweet Finn, grow up in this community.
If you know someone who may be headed home right now, it may be worth shooting them a text or calling them. Let them know they need to take it just a little bit extra slowly tonight as they're driving home because we have some fog that's increasing. And in some spots, we're probably seeing some of that frost develop either on your car or not quite on the road, but probably near the road. You might be able to see it in the foreground. So this is what it looks like over towards the western part of the Treasure Valley. And you can see that frost building up on the plants there. But this is in between between Caldwell and Ontario. And if we look over towards Caldwell and the upper levels of this view, you can see a little bit of that fog increasing as well. So here's where we can see with the visibility all the way down to 0 over in Ontario. So very dense fog, also very dense over towards Caldwell. And it's been slowly increasing towards the east. So areas like Boise probably going to see that increase tonight and likely sticking around through tomorrow morning as well. Other areas to the east staying clear for now, but probably some haze, not quite as bad as what we're seeing over in Boise. But the haze and the fog chances and the ice will all be sticking around through your 7-day forecast. Not a whole lot of changes as the inversion sticks around, but chance of that breaking down closer to the weekend.
Welcome back. Let's get to your comments today on this Monday. This one sent in from Nick S. So the state legislature and Idaho Department of Education are arguing against DEI, but there's no concrete definition of what it is and what it is or isn't preventing. Couldn't we use these hearings to address why Idaho is bottom 10 in funding and student performance? It's a good question and probably something they will eventually address, I guess. This is getting out of control. A female resource center is for women, not men, says David. You know why we have female resource centers? Because women are more likely to experience sexual harassment, rape, abuse, pay inequality, etc. Are you saying that Senator Wintrow's story of 2 men going to the Women's Resource Center is not true? It already is open to everybody is the point she was trying to make. And yes, people use them for different reasons, including those reasons. The reason for DEI programs in the first place is because of discrimination against people of color and women. Sad, but not surprised to see Idaho abandoning these folks, says Jack in Boise. There's a big history of it, too, at the University of Idaho. One of these days, we'll break into that. We'll break that down. We'll see you tomorrow.